session. I'm Dr. Sadaf Ali. I'm with the Communication, Media, and Theater Arts Department. So I'm moderating this session. My research area is also race and media, so this is a very fascinating panel. I'm really excited about this research presentations in this particular group. So our first session is White Guilt and White Frailty, Barriers to Anti-Racist Allyship by Brialle Ringer. The faculty mentors were Anne Rall and Laura Martinez.
Yeah, as you said, my name is Brialle, and I'm going to be talking about white guilt and white fragility, barriers to becoming an anti-racism ally. So I want to start by saying why I'm presenting on this topic, because ideally a white person would be talking about white privilege and this topic. However, I am a mixed race, multiracial person of color. I'm a lighter skinned person of color, and so I still benefit from the system of white supremacy. So growing up, my white side of the family is on my mother's side, and on my father's side, they are black. So I grew up in the Upper Peninsula, which is 2% African American, and was very close to my white side of the family. However, this has changed recently since I moved downstate, started learning a lot more about race, and also with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. Since I'm no longer in the Upper Peninsula, I stay connected to my family on social media. That has been kind of problematic to see their reactions to Black Lives Matter, police brutality, and racism as a whole. And has been extremely hurtful and saddening, honestly, to see what their reactions have been. And it's really distanced me from them. So when I try to engage people in conversations about racism, and particularly my family, my friends, and just the general public, and people respond defensively, I really shut down, and I no longer want to engage in the conversation, and I honestly feel like cutting them out of my life, because it's exhausting to continually debate the existence of my reality as a person of color and my existence and experience with racism. So when people refuse to see that and see my experience, I don't want them in my life. However, I don't want that to continue to be the pattern. I want to be able to have open and honest conversations about racism, but when I engage in conversations and I receive these common defensive responses, I want to kind of outline what some of those common responses that I get, how I interpret those as a person of color, and what some more productive responses would be. So I'm coming to this conversation from a place of hurt, but also from a place of love, because I want us to all be able to be honest with ourselves and provoke some critical thinking about the issue. So to talk about white guilt and white fragility, there's kind of a lot of base understanding that you have to have about what race is and what racism is. I can't spend a lot of time creating that base understanding, or I'll never get to this part. So I do have some handouts floating around about some definitions that will be helpful, so please share with your partners if throughout the presentation you're confused about a topic, just refer there. But I will highlight some of the important guiding principles for this conversation. So racism is a combination of prejudice and power. So it's beyond just not liking a group of people based on the color of their skin. You have to have the power to carry out your prejudice beliefs. You have to have a system of institutional power, societal and structural barriers that support your prejudice beliefs and keep the people that you have prejudice beliefs about subjugated and disenfranchised. So that means that people of color can't be racist. We can be prejudiced, but we can't be racist because we don't have the power to be racist and carry out those prejudice beliefs. So in the United States, whites hold the majority of wealth and power. So that means that if racism is a construct of prejudice and power, in the United States, only whites can be racist, because you have a system of white supremacy backing those prejudice beliefs about people of color that keeps them disenfranchised. So another thing I want to touch on is being racist doesn't make you a bad person. It means that you're human. In the United States, racism is inherent in our socialization that we receive. It is in the air you breathe and the water you drink. So you have to unlearn these behaviors. And having prejudice beliefs and biases doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you have work to do, and we all do. So white guilt is the individual or collective guilt felt by some white people for harm resulting from racist treatment of ethnic minorities by whites, both historically and currently. Now, white fragility is a low ability to tolerate racial stress. This often comes out in conversations of racism, and the response is defensiveness and not wanting to fully engage in the conversation, and that's an example of white fragility. White guilt and white fragility are forms of cognitive dissonance used to protect ourselves from a belief in a just world. So you might have grown up thinking that people are all treated equally, your parents maybe didn't talk to you about race, and so to acknowledge racism will shake up your belief in the just world. And that's hard to acknowledge the inhumanity, the injustice experienced by people of color, and to realize that we aren't all treated equally. So that can be hard to acknowledge and deal with. So I want to share a quote that I think sums up the problematic aspect of focusing on your own discomfort as a white person in conversations with racism. Millions of black lives are valued less than a single white person's hurt feelings. Millions of black lives are valued less than a single white person's hurt feelings. This is what it feels like when you get caught up in feeling guilty or defensive about racism. It's really not about you. So you can't get caught up in that. And instead of feeling guilty, something that would be significantly more powerful is to use the white privilege that you have as a position of power to speak out against racism. That would be significantly more powerful than feeling guilty. So now I'll get into some of those common responses when I'm having conversations about racism with white people. I don't see color. Claiming color blindness. Like, first off, that's BS, because you see the color of the sky, you see the color of my dress, but somehow, like, when you're looking at people, you just don't see color. It doesn't make sense to me. So when I hear you not fully acknowledging me as a person of color, I want you to see all this melanin. It's beautiful, and it makes a significant difference in the way that our lives are experienced and the barriers that I experience as a person of color. Another thing that I hear with this sentiment is wanting to believe in people being treated equally regardless of the color of their skin. But in order to get there, you have to see the problems with racism in our society as it currently exists. And so you need to see color, you need to see the experience that people of color experience with disadvantage. And so a more productive response would be to critically think about why you're choosing not to see color. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, but to not see it is to protect white supremacy and white privilege. And if you are not speaking out about that system and not acknowledging it, then you are complicit in that system of oppression and you are part of the problem. Okay, this is another one. I'm not white, I'm Italian, or insert other ethnicity here. Well, we're not talking about ethnicity, we're talking about race. And I'm hearing you not acknowledge the white privilege that you experience as a person with whiter skin. So regardless of whether you're Swedish, French, Italian, what have you, if the color of your skin is white, then you benefit from the system of white supremacy. And so a more productive response would be, I don't identify as white, I identify as insert ethnicity here, but I acknowledge that I benefit from the system of white supremacy as a person with whiter skin and European features. So sometimes people who have experienced disadvantage with class, they grew up poor, have a hard time acknowledging and understanding white privilege. I grew up poor, I can't be privileged. So what I'm hearing is an attempt to deflect the conversation from race to focus on oppression that you've experienced from another aspect of your identity. White privilege does not mean that your life was not hard and that everything was handed to you on a silver platter. Your life might have been hard, but it's not hard because you're white. A more productive response is understanding that you still benefit from the system of white supremacy, and really just focusing on what the conversation is at hand. Don't try to deflect it and talk about your own experience, because we're talking about race and you need to learn from what we're talking about. And it's really important that you focus on that. You're so angry. I might not have been before, but you said that and now I'm pissed. So, like, I have every right to be angry. People of color have every right to feel the way that they feel. And so when you say, oh, you're so angry, I feel like you're stereotyping me as an angry black woman to silence me. And that's extremely frustrating. And again, now I'm pissed. So allow people of color to be upset. Allow us to be angry, allow us to feel pain, and regardless of how we confront you about racism, listen. Just listen. It doesn't matter if I'm angry or I'm level-headed. Listen to what I'm saying and really take that in. Okay, so I wish I had more time to go into all of the common responses, but on some of the handouts that I've passed out, there are resources of suggested readings that go more in depth into this. But what can you do to be an anti-racism ally? Learn. And when I say learn, don't just ask your people of color friends about every question that you have, and you need to do the work yourself as well. It's important that you're putting in effort to do the research, find resources. There's a plethora of them available. Please Google it before you come to me about questions. And have humility. Understand that you can never fully understand my experience as a person of color. And so just understanding that you can always learn more and coming to the conversation with that humility is really important. Teach your white friends and your family and talk to your children about race. Sometimes people feel like they need to come into black spaces in order to be an ally, and I think it's important to have connections with people of color, but it's also really important that you talk to other white people about the issue. Allow people of color the space to speak about their experience. And try not to take up that space by trying to interject with, oh yeah, I have my best friend that's black experienced something like that too. Speak from your own experience and allow people of color the space to speak about theirs. And I want to leave on some reflecting questions to ask yourself to think more critically about your own prejudices. How does my background and experiences shape my identity? What groups am I most comfortable interacting with? What groups cause me discomfort or fear, and why? What actions do I need to embrace in order to address stereotypes